The rusted padlock clicked open in the sweltering Arizona heat, and Sarah Martinez wiped sweat from her forehead as she stared into the dim storage unit. 27 years old, 6 months pregnant, and down to her last $100 after the auction fee. This had to pay off. Inside sat 12 hulking ATM machines, their screens dark and cables dangling like dead snakes. Sarah's pulse quickened. She knew these machines better than anyone should. Before her life fell apart, before the pregnancy, before everything went wrong, she'd been the best cybersecurity analyst the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit had ever seen. Her fingers traced the serial number on the first machine, and her blood turned to ice. This wasn't just any ATM. It was from the Meridian Bank job, the one that cost her partner his life and forced her into witness protection, the one she'd spent 3 years trying to forget. Inside this machine could be the evidence that would either clear her name or get her killed. As she reached for the access panel, one question burned in her mind. How did machines from the most notorious unsolved heist in FBI history end up in a random storage unit in Phoenix? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Sarah's hand trembled as she pulled back from the machine. The storage facility hummed with the white noise of industrial air conditioning, but inside Unit 247, the air hung thick and stifling. She glanced over her shoulder at the empty corridor stretching between rows of orange metal doors. Nobody else had shown interest in this particular auction lot. 12 broken ATMs weren't exactly hot commodities. The auctioneer had barely glanced at them before accepting her lowball bid. The baby kicked, a sharp reminder of why she was here. Rent was due in 6 days. The clinic bill sat unpaid on her kitchen counter. Her SNAP benefits had been cut after a bureaucratic mix-up she couldn't afford to fight. When she'd seen the storage auction advertised online, desperation had overridden common sense. Maybe she could salvage the metal, sell the parts, scrape together enough to buy another month of survival. But this changed everything. Sarah forced herself to breathe slowly, the way Dr. Chen had taught her during those mandatory therapy sessions. In through the nose, out through the mouth. The serial number seemed to burn itself into her retinas, MD70742K. She'd memorized dozens of them 3 years ago, back when Special Agent Sarah Martinez had been somebody who mattered, back when she'd carried a badge and a gun instead of a fake ID and crushing debt. The Meridian Bank heist had been elegant in its simplicity. 47 ATMs across 12 states, all compromised simultaneously through a software backdoor nobody had seen coming. $37 million vanished in the space of 6 hours. The Bureau's task force had worked the case for 18 months, chasing digital ghosts through encrypted networks and shell companies. She and Marcus had been close, so close they could taste the breakthrough. Then Marcus died in that car accident, except it hadn't been an accident. Sarah's phone buzzed in her pocket, startling her. A text from her landlord. Rent check bounced. Need payment by Friday or we start eviction proceedings. She deleted it without responding. The access panel hung slightly ajar, as if someone had tried to open it and given up. Sarah pulled her phone's flashlight and peered inside. The standard components were there: card reader, cash dispenser, motherboard. But something else caught her eye. A small device she didn't recognize, wedged behind the network interface. It wasn't part of the original architecture. Her training kicked in despite herself. She photographed the device from multiple angles, noting the model numbers and connections. The thing looked custom-built, probably designed to intercept transaction data. This was how they'd done it. This was the smoking gun the Bureau had never found. The implications hit her like a physical blow. If these ATMs contained evidence from the Meridian job, then whoever had owned this storage unit was connected to the heist. More importantly, if the real perpetrators learned that Sarah Martinez, former FBI analyst, current fugitive, had stumbled onto their abandoned equipment, her new identity wouldn't protect her. They'd killed Marcus for getting too close. They wouldn't hesitate to eliminate a pregnant woman living under an assumed name. But the evidence could also vindicate her. The official report had painted her as either incompetent or complicit, a disgraced agent who'd leaked information that got her partner killed. Only she knew the truth, that Marcus had discovered something massive, something worth killing for, in those final days before his death. Sarah's phone rang. Unknown number. She let it go to voicemail, then immediately regretted it. In her old life, unknown numbers meant work, leads, progress. In her new life, they meant debt collectors, caseworkers, or worse. The machine seemed to loom over her in the dim light. 11 others sat in silent judgment, each potentially containing pieces of a puzzle she'd been forced to abandon. The smart move was to walk away, forfeit her $200, pretend she'd never seen the serial number. Disappear back into the anonymous masses of Phoenix, just another struggling single mother. But Sarah had never been good at walking away. The first thing Sarah noticed when she rolled up the metal door wasn't the ATMs themselves, but the smell. Stale air mixed with something metallic and sharp, like pennies left in a hot car. She fumbled for her phone's flashlight, the weak beam cutting through the darkness to reveal shapes that made no sense. 3 automated teller machines sat lined up against the back wall like sleeping sentries. Not the modern, sleek kind you'd find at a bank, but older models with scratched surfaces and faded logos. Between them, cardboard boxes were stacked haphazardly, some split open to reveal tangles of cables and what looked like electronic components. "What the hell?" Sarah whispered, stepping deeper into the 10 by 12 space. The concrete floor was clean except for a few oil stains, and everything appeared deliberately arranged, not randomly dumped. She approached the nearest ATM, running her fingers along its surface. A piece of duct tape covered what should have been the bank's logo, and someone had scratched Unit 7 into the metal with something sharp. The cash dispenser hung open like a mouth, empty and dark. Sarah's heart hammered as she moved to the boxes. The first one contained coils of thick cable, the kind used for heavy-duty electrical work. The second held what appeared to be circuit boards and small tools she didn't recognize. But it was the third box that made her blood freeze. Bundles of documents wrapped in plastic bags filled the container. She pulled one out with trembling fingers, unwrapping it to find bank floor plans. Detailed blueprints showing alarm systems, camera placements, and security protocols for First National Bank of Seattle. The margins were covered in handwritten notes, measurements, and timing calculations. Another plastic bundle contained photographs, surveillance shots of bank employees arriving and leaving work, close-ups of security guards, time-stamped images of armored car deliveries. Sarah's stomach lurched as she recognized the methodical planning of something terrible. She grabbed another bundle, this one heavier. Inside were newspaper clippings about the first national heist that had dominated headlines 8 months ago. $13 million vanished in what investigators called the most sophisticated bank robbery in state history. The thieves had somehow accessed the bank's network, manipulating the system to dispense massive amounts of cash from multiple ATMs simultaneously before disappearing without a trace. The FBI had offered a $1 million reward for information leading to arrests. Sarah remembered watching the news coverage while Emma played on the floor of their cramped apartment, thinking how that kind of money could solve every problem in her life. Now she was holding what looked like the entire operation's planning materials. Sarah's hands shook as she photographed everything with her phone. The blueprints, the surveillance photos, even the serial numbers visible on the ATM units. Part of her wanted to run, to lock the unit and pretend she'd never seen any of this. But $13 million was missing, and someone had paid months of rent on this storage space to hide the evidence. A sound from outside made her freeze, footsteps on gravel moving slowly between the storage units. Sarah killed her phone's flashlight and crouched behind the middle ATM, her heart pounding so hard she was sure whoever was out there could hear it. The footsteps stopped directly outside her unit. Through the gap under the raised door, she could see the shadow of feet, work boots, standing motionless. Sarah pressed her hand over her mouth to muffle her breathing, the plastic-wrapped documents crackling softly in her lap. After what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, the footsteps continued past. Sarah waited until she couldn't hear them anymore before moving. She quickly stuffed the documents back into their boxes, her mind racing through possibilities. Someone was still watching this place. Maybe the original thieves, maybe law enforcement, maybe both. Either way, she was now in possession of evidence that people had killed for and would kill for again. But as she prepared to leave, one more bundle caught her eye. Smaller than the others, wedged behind the circuit boards. Inside the plastic was a single sheet of paper with a phone number and an address in Portland. Below that, in careful handwriting, "If anything happens to me, contact Agent Maria Rodriguez, FBI." "She's clean." Sarah stared at the note, realizing she was holding a dead person's insurance policy. Whoever had rented this unit was gone, probably permanently, and they'd known it might happen. She photographed the note and carefully placed everything back where she'd found it. As she rolled down the metal door, Sarah's mind was already working through the implications. She had evidence that could solve the biggest bank heist in history, but coming forward would mean explaining how she'd found it. Her background check would reveal her criminal record, making her an unreliable witness at best. Worse, if the wrong people discovered what she knew, she and Emma would become targets. The $1 million reward suddenly seemed like a very expensive gamble. Sarah's hands trembled as she stared at the screen of her laptop, the blue glow illuminating her face in the darkness of her apartment. Emma slept soundly in the next room, oblivious to the storm brewing in her mother's mind. The numbers on the bank statements she'd photographed earlier seemed to pulse with malevolent energy. $47 million, the biggest bank heist in Seattle's history, according to every news article she could find. The robbery had happened 18 months ago. First National Bank's downtown branch, hit during a sophisticated operation that left investigators baffled. No arrests had ever been made. The thieves had vanished like smoke, leaving behind only questions and a city-wide manhunt that eventually went cold. And now their evidence was sitting in her storage unit. Sarah closed the laptop and pressed her palms against her eyes. The smart thing would be to call the police, turn everything over and walk away clean. But the thought of losing the storage unit and potentially facing questions about how she'd afforded it in the first place made her stomach clench. She was already 3 weeks behind on rent, and Mrs. Chen had been leaving increasingly pointed messages about payment schedules. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Hope you found what you were looking for today." The blood drained from Sarah's face. She stared at the message, reading it over and over. Someone had been watching her. Someone new. She rushed to the window and peered through the blinds at the street below. Nothing looked out of place, just the usual collection of beat-up cars and empty sidewalks that characterized her neighborhood after midnight. But the feeling of being observed crawled up her spine like ice water. Another text: "Storage units can be dangerous places. Lots of accidents happen there." Sarah's breathing became shallow. She grabbed her phone with shaking fingers and started to dial 911, then stopped. What would she tell them? That she'd bought stolen goods and now someone was threatening her? They'd want to know everything, and everything would lead back to questions she couldn't answer without destroying the fragile life she'd built for Emma. The phone rang in her hand, making her jump. Unknown number. "Don't hang up," a male voice said when she answered. Calm, professional, with the faint trace of an accent she couldn't place. "We need to talk. I don't know what you think I—" Sarah Chen Morrison, 1247 Pine Street, apartment 3B. Emma starts kindergarten at Riverside Elementary in 2 weeks. You work nights at Mercy General, usually catch the 6:47 bus home. The casual recitation of her life's details hit her like physical blows. What do you want? What's mine? You stumbled into something that doesn't concern you, but now it does. The contents of that storage unit belong to people who don't forgive and forget. Sarah sank onto her couch, legs suddenly too weak to support her. I'll give it back, all of it. I just need... It's not that simple anymore. You've seen too much. You've been inside, handled things, taken pictures. How could he possibly know about the pictures? Unless... Sarah's blood turned to ice as she realized someone must have been watching her the entire time she was in the unit. The feeling of being observed hadn't been paranoia. Here's what's going to happen, the voice continued. Tomorrow at noon, you're going to go back to that unit. You're going to load everything into a van that will be waiting for you. Then you're going to forget any of this ever happened. And if I don't... The silence stretched long enough that Sarah wondered if he'd hung up. When he spoke again, his voice carried a weight that made her hands shake. I know what school Emma will attend. I know her teacher's name is Mrs. Rodriguez. I know she likes strawberry Pop-Tarts for breakfast and that little stuffed rabbit she carries everywhere. A pause. Children are so vulnerable, aren't they? The phone slipped from Sarah's nerveless fingers. She stared at it lying on the cushion beside her, the connection still active. Emma's door was slightly ajar, and she could hear her daughter's soft breathing from the bedroom. The sound that usually brought her comfort now filled her with terror. Are you still there, Sarah? She picked up the phone. Yes. Good. Noon tomorrow. Don't be late, and don't do anything foolish like calling the police. We'll know if you do, and Emma will pay the price. The line went dead. Sarah sat in the darkness, surrounded by the detritus of their modest life. Emma's drawings taped to the refrigerator, a pile of medical bills on the coffee table, toys scattered across the worn carpet. Everything she'd fought so hard to build, so carefully protected, now hung by a thread because she'd wanted something that wasn't hers. She looked at her phone again, finger hovering over the emergency contact. But every scenario that played out in her mind ended the same way, with Emma in danger and herself powerless to stop it. The trap had already closed around them both. The coffee shop hummed with morning chatter, but Sarah felt like she was sitting in a fishbowl. Every face seemed suspicious. Every glance in her direction felt loaded with meaning. She'd barely slept, her mind cycling through images of those blood-stained bills and the implications they carried. Marcus arrived exactly on time, sliding into the booth across from her with the casual confidence she remembered from their brief marriage. He looked good, better than he had any right to, considering he'd walked out on them 2 years ago. You look tired, he said, signaling the waitress for coffee. Thanks for the pep talk. Sarah wrapped her hands around her mug, needing the warmth. Did you bring what I asked for? Marcus reached into his jacket and pulled out a manila folder, keeping it close to his chest. Bank robbery details going back 5 years. Took some creative searching through the archives. His eyes narrowed. Want to tell me why you're suddenly interested in financial crimes? Sarah had rehearsed this conversation, but now that she was here, the words felt clumsy in her mouth. I might have stumbled onto something. Information about a heist. What kind of information? She glanced around the coffee shop again. A businessman reading the Wall Street Journal, a young mother with a stroller, a man in a baseball cap who seemed to be paying too much attention to his phone. The kind that could get someone hurt. Marcus leaned forward, his reporter instincts fully engaged now. Sarah, what did you find? I can't tell you everything. Not yet. But I need to know about any major bank robberies that involved ATMs being stolen. Specifically, multiple machines taken from different locations. The waitress brought Marcus his coffee, and he waited until she was gone before opening the folder slightly. There's been a few over the years, but nothing that matches what you're describing. He paused, studying her face. Wait, there is one case, about 18 months ago. The Meridian Bank job. Sarah's pulse quickened. Tell me. 6 ATMs stolen from different Meridian Bank locations over a 3-day period. The thieves used trucks, just drove up and loaded them. Security footage was useless. They knew exactly where the cameras were. Marcus flipped through some pages. The strange part was they never tried to crack the machines, just vanished with them. How much money? That's what made it the story of the year. Each machine was loaded for a long weekend, over 2 million total. But here's the thing that never made sense to investigators. Marcus lowered his voice. The thieves had inside information. They knew which machines would have the highest cash loads, which routes the armored cars took, everything. Sarah felt sick. Inside job? Had to be. But they never found the insider. 3 arrests were made, small-time guys who probably just drove the trucks. The real brains behind it disappeared, along with the money and the machines. The man in the baseball cap was definitely watching them now. Sarah tried to keep her voice steady. What happened to the guys they arrested? Marcus's expression darkened. 2 died in prison before trial, mysterious circumstances. The third one claimed he was just hired muscle, said he never saw the faces of the people running the operation. He got out on a technicality 6 months ago. Where is he now? That's the million-dollar question. Vincent Kowalski. He was supposed to check in with his parole officer weekly, but he missed his first appointment. Nobody's seen him since. Sarah's blood went cold. Vincent Kowalski, the name on that driver's license in the storage unit. She gripped her coffee mug tighter, fighting to keep her expression neutral. Sarah, you're scaring me. What aren't you telling me? Before she could answer, her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. We know you found them. Stay quiet and live. The coffee shop suddenly felt airless. Sarah stood abruptly, nearly knocking over her chair. I have to go. Sarah, wait. She grabbed his arm. Listen to me carefully. If anyone comes asking about this conversation, about what we discussed, you tell them I was asking for help with a freelance article. Nothing else. You're in danger, aren't you? Marcus stood too, his voice urgent. Let me help. Whatever this is. No. She was already moving toward the exit. You help by forgetting we talked about this. For Emma's sake, if not mine. She left him standing there and pushed through the door onto the busy sidewalk. Her hands shook as she walked quickly toward her car, the phone still clutched in her palm. Another text appeared. Smart choice. Keep it that way. Behind her, she caught a glimpse of the man in the baseball cap leaving the coffee shop. He wasn't following her directly, but he was moving in the same direction with the practiced casualness of someone who knew how to track without being obvious. Sarah got in her car and locked the doors, her mind racing. They knew. Somehow, they already knew she'd found the storage unit, found their secret, which meant she was already deeper in this than she'd realized, and there might not be a way out that didn't end with her and Emma getting hurt. The plastic bag crinkled as Sarah emptied its contents onto a kitchen table. 3 flash drives, a notebook filled with handwritten numbers, and a photograph of 2 men shaking hands outside what looked like a corporate building. Her hands trembled as she picked up the photo, studying their faces in the dim overhead light. One man she didn't recognize, middle-aged, expensive suit, the kind of polished appearance that screamed money. The other made her stomach drop. She'd seen that face before, plastered across news broadcasts just weeks ago. Marcus Webb, former bank executive, currently wanted by the FBI for questioning in connection with the Meridian Trust heist. The notebook's pages were filled with dates, times, and what appeared to be security codes. Sarah flipped through them, her pulse quickening with each page. March 15th, the date circled in red ink, matched the news reports she'd frantically Googled earlier. That was the day someone had accessed Meridian Trust's central systems and transferred $47 million into ghost accounts. Emma's voice drifted from the living room where cartoons played on their second-hand television. The normalcy of it felt surreal against the evidence spread before Sarah. She was staring at proof of the biggest financial crime in the state's history, and her daughter was worried about whether the cartoon cat would catch the mouse. Sarah inserted the first flash drive into a laptop, her finger hovering over the trackpad. Once she opened these files, there would be no going back to ignorance. She clicked. Spreadsheets filled the screen. Bank routing numbers, account details, transaction logs. Her eyes widened as she scrolled through row after row of data. This wasn't just evidence of the Meridian Trust job. These files contained information on dozens of banks, hundreds of accounts, security protocols that should have been impossible to obtain. The second drive revealed something worse. Video files, their thumbnails showing security camera footage from various bank locations. Sarah opened one at random, and watched grainy footage of people she assumed were employees moving through what looked like a vault area. They moved with purpose, clearly familiar with the layout. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "We know you found something interesting today." Sarah's blood turned to ice. She stared at the message, reading it 3 times before the words fully sank in. Her hands shook as she typed back, "Who is this?" The response came immediately. "Someone who wants their property back. Check your front porch." Every instinct screamed at her not to look, but her legs moved anyway, carrying her to the front window. She pulled the curtain aside just enough to peer out. A black sedan sat parked across the street, its engine running. Even through the tinted windows, she could make out the silhouette of someone in the driver's seat. Sarah stumbled backward, her mind racing. They'd found her somehow. But how? She'd paid cash for the storage unit, used her real name only because she'd never expected to find anything valuable. Now that decision felt like the worst mistake of her life. Another text. 5 minutes. "Come outside alone, bring everything you took, and this ends quietly. Involve anyone else, and your daughter becomes part of the conversation. Emma." Sarah's maternal instincts flared white-hot. She rushed to the living room where her daughter sat cross-legged on the floor, completely absorbed in her cartoons. The idea of anyone threatening Emma made Sarah's vision blur with rage, but beneath the anger was pure terror. She had 2 choices. Neither good. Give up the evidence and hope these people kept their word about leaving them alone, or find another way out that didn't put Emma at risk. The rational part of her mind argued that cooperating was the smart play. These were clearly dangerous people with resources and connections. What chance did a single mother with $53 in her checking account have against them? But the files she'd seen suggested this was bigger than just one heist. If she handed everything over, how many more crimes would these people commit? How many more victims would there be? Sarah's phone buzzed again. 3 minutes. She made her decision. Moving quickly but quietly, she copied the flash drive contents to her laptop's hard drive, then uploaded everything to a cloud storage account she rarely used. Her fingers flew across the keyboard as she composed an email to herself with the account details, scheduling it to send in 24 hours. If something happened to her, at least there would be a trail. The evidence went back into the plastic bag. Sarah grabbed her jacket and keys, then knelt beside Emma. "Sweetheart, Mommy has to go outside for just a minute. Stay right here and keep the door locked, okay?" Emma nodded absently, still focused on her show. Sarah kissed her daughter's forehead, breathing in the familiar scent of strawberry shampoo, then walked toward the front door. The sedan's headlights flicked on as she stepped onto the porch, illuminating her like a target. The coffee shop buzzed with morning energy, but Sarah felt like she was sitting in a fishbowl. Every face seemed suspicious. Every glance lingered too long. She'd chosen a corner table with clear sight lines to both entrances, a habit she'd never needed before yesterday. Marcus Chen arrived exactly on time, sliding into the seat across from her with the casual confidence of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. He was younger than she'd expected, maybe early 30s, with sharp eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and the kind of expensive suit that whispered rather than shouted. "Miss Morrison." He extended a hand. "Thank you for calling." Sarah's palms were sweating. "I'm not sure I should be here." "But you are." Marcus signaled the waitress and ordered black coffee without looking at the menu, "which tells me you've found something that's keeping you awake at night." The directness caught her off guard. She'd rehearsed careful deflections, ways to feel him out without revealing too much. But sitting here now, watching him study her with those calculating eyes, she realized she was already in over her head. "Hypothetically," she began, then stopped. Even that felt like stepping off a cliff. Marcus leaned back, patient. The waitress brought his coffee and refreshed Sarah's cup. Steam rose between them like a barrier. "I cover financial crime," he said finally. "Corporate fraud, money laundering, organized crime connections to legitimate businesses. I've been working the banking beat for 8 years. Whatever you've stumbled onto, I've probably seen worse." Sarah doubted that. She pulled out her phone, thumb hovering over the photos she'd taken. One glimpse of those serial numbers, and there would be no going back. If someone found evidence of a crime, a big one, what would happen to them? Depends on the crime, depends on who committed it, depends on whether the person with evidence is smart about how they handle it. Smart how? Marcus's expression shifted, becoming more serious. Smart enough to document everything before making contact with authorities. Smart enough to have insurance policies in place. Smart enough to know that doing the right thing isn't always the safe thing. The word sent ice through her veins. Insurance policies? Copies in multiple locations. People who know to release information if something happens. Legal representation lined up before you need it. He paused. Why? What kind of evidence are we talking about? Sarah's phone buzzed. Text from Emma's school parent conference requested for Thursday 3 p.m. Please confirm. Reality crashed back. Emma's teacher probably wanted to discuss her daughter's recent distraction, maybe her grades slipping because mom had been working double shifts. Normal problems, manageable problems, the problems of a woman who minded her own business and stayed invisible. I need to think about this more, Sarah said, sliding her phone away. Of course. Marcus reached into his jacket and pulled out a business card. But while you're thinking, remember that evidence has a shelf life. People who commit big crimes don't usually leave loose ends hanging around forever. The words hit like a physical blow. Sarah had been so focused on the decision of whether to come forward that she hadn't fully processed the danger of waiting. Every day those ATMs sat in her storage unit was another day for whoever put them there to remember, to come looking to find her. How long do I have? The question slipped out before she could stop it. Marcus tilted his head, suddenly very alert. To do what? Sarah realized she'd revealed more than intended. The careful dance of hypotheticals had crumbled. I need to go. She started to rise, but Marcus's voice stopped her. Sarah, can I call you Sarah? I've been doing this long enough to recognize when someone's in real danger. Whatever you found, whoever it involves, they already know it's missing. The clock isn't just ticking on the evidence, it's ticking on you. The coffee shop noise faded to white static. Sarah sank back into her chair, feeling the weight of inevitability settle on her shoulders. If I show you something and you publish it, what happens to me? I protect my sources, always. What if your protection isn't enough? Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Then we make sure the story is big enough that silencing you would draw more attention than leaving you alone. Sarah laughed, a bitter sound. So my safety depends on becoming famous for something that could destroy my life. Sometimes the only way out is through. She looked around the coffee shop one more time, at the business people checking emails, the students with textbooks, the mothers like herself juggling phones and schedules, normal people living normal lives, blissfully unaware that someone at table 12 was deciding whether to detonate a bomb that would change everything. Sarah pulled her phone back out and opened the photo gallery. There are 4 ATMs, she said quietly, and they're full of money that doesn't belong to whoever put them in my storage unit. The next morning, Sarah called in sick to work. Her voice trembled as she spoke to her manager, claiming a stomach bug that would keep her home for a day or two. It wasn't entirely a lie. The anxiety churning in her gut felt like the worst illness she'd ever experienced. Emma bounced around the apartment, ready for school, oblivious to the storm brewing in her mother's mind. Sarah packed her daughter's lunch with mechanical precision, her hands moving while her thoughts raced through scenarios. Each possibility seemed worse than the last. "Mommy, you look tired," Emma said, tugging on Sarah's sleeve. "I'm fine, sweetheart. Just didn't sleep well." Sarah forced a smile and kissed Emma's forehead. "Mrs. Patterson will pick you up today, remember? I might be resting when you get home." After the school bus pulled away, Sarah sat at her kitchen table with her laptop and 3 cups of coffee. She'd spent hours the night before researching the Meridian bank heist, and each new detail made her stomach clench tighter. $27 million, an inside job. The FBI's biggest unsolved case in the region, 3 suspects who had vanished without a trace. The photographs from the storage unit were spread across her table like tarot cards predicting doom. She'd printed them at a 24-hour copy shop, paying cash, wearing sunglasses and a baseball cap like some amateur spy. The images looked even more damning in daylight. Serial numbers, bank routing codes, what appeared to be blueprints of the bank's vault system. Her phone buzzed. Detective Rivera. Sarah stared at the screen until it went to voicemail, then immediately played the message. Mrs. Chen, this is Detective Rivera. I wanted to follow up on our conversation yesterday. I've been thinking about what you said, and I'd like to discuss it further. Please give me a call when you have a chance. His tone was casual, friendly even, but Sarah heard something underneath it. Suspicion? Curiosity? She couldn't tell, and that uncertainty felt like a knife between her ribs. She needed advice, but who could she trust? Her sister lived 3 states away and would panic. Her few friends were work acquaintances who barely knew her struggles. Her ex-husband would probably find a way to use this against her in court. The storage facility, maybe the answer lay there. Sarah drove across town with the photographs in a manila envelope beside her. The facility looked different in daylight, less ominous, more ordinary. Just rows of metal buildings housing people's forgotten lives. She parked and walked to the office, where a different employee sat behind the desk. This one was younger, maybe college-aged, with kind eyes and an easy smile. Help you with something? I purchased unit 247 a couple days ago, Sarah said. I was wondering if you could tell me anything about the previous owner? The young man's fingers clicked across the keyboard. Looks like that unit was purchased by... He squinted at the screen. Marcus Webb. Had it for about 2 years, paid in cash every month until 6 months ago. When he stopped paying, we sent notices to his address, but they came back undeliverable. Do you have that address? I can't give out personal information, but... He glanced around the empty office and leaned closer. Between you and me, it was a P.O. box that got closed around the same time. Weird situation. The guy seemed normal enough, came by every few weeks, then just gone. Marcus Webb. Sarah committed the name to memory. Did he ever mention what he was storing? Equipment, he said. Some kind of repair business. Always came alone, drove different cars. The employee paused. You find anything strange in there? Sarah's heart hammered. Just old electronics. Nothing valuable. Back in her car, she called Detective Rivera. Mrs. Chen, thanks for calling back. I was hoping we could meet again. There have been some developments in a case I'm working on, and your insight might be helpful. What kind of developments? The kind better discussed in person. Are you available this afternoon? Sarah closed her eyes. Once she walked into that police station, there would be no going back. No more pretending she was just a struggling single mother who'd bought a storage unit looking for furniture to sell. Can I ask you something, Detective? Hypothetically, if someone found evidence of a crime, but turning it in might put their family at risk, what would you advise them to do? A long pause. Hypothetically, I'd say that person should trust law enforcement to protect them. We have resources, programs designed exactly for these situations. And if those programs failed, if something happened anyway? Mrs. Chen, are you in some kind of trouble? Sarah hung up. She sat in the parking lot of the storage facility, watching ordinary people going about their ordinary lives, accessing their ordinary belongings. None of them were sitting on evidence that could solve the biggest heist in regional history. None of them were wondering if they'd wake up tomorrow. Her phone rang again. Rivera. This time, she turned it off. The motel room smelled like cigarettes and desperation. Sarah sat on the edge of the sagging bed, Emma's small hand clutched in hers as her daughter slept fitfully beside her. The cash from the storage unit lay scattered across the dresser, $37,000 that felt both like salvation and a death sentence. Her phone buzzed for the 15th time in an hour. Unknown number again. She'd stopped answering after the 3rd call when the gravelly voice had simply said, "We know where you are." Sarah pulled the thin curtains tighter and checked the deadbolt for the 100th time. The Sleepy Inn wasn't exactly the Ritz, but it was cash only, and the desk clerk hadn't asked questions when she'd registered under a fake name. Still, every car door slam in the parking lot made her jump. Emma stirred, her fever finally breaking after 2 days of Tylenol and worry. The antibiotics from the urgent care clinic were working, but Sarah knew they were living on borrowed time. The money could buy them a new life somewhere far from here, but it could also buy them a shallow grave if the wrong people found them first. The local news droned from the ancient television, volume barely audible. Sarah had been monitoring every channel since yesterday, waiting for some mention of the storage unit, the ATMs, anything that might give her a clue about what she'd stumbled into. So far, nothing. She picked up one of the ledgers she'd taken from the unit, squinting at the cramped handwriting in the dim lamplight. Names, dates, account numbers, all meaningless to her but clearly significant to someone. Marcus Delgado's name appeared repeatedly, along with others she didn't recognize. The most recent entries were dated just 3 months ago. A car pulled into the parking lot, its headlights sweeping across her window. Sarah froze, watching the shadows move across the wall until the engine cut off and a door slammed. Footsteps on gravel. She held her breath, counting the seconds until she heard another door open and close, someone entering a different room. Her hands shook as she reached for the burner phone she'd bought at a gas station. Detective Morrison's card was crumpled in her pocket, worn from nervous handling. She'd memorized the number by now but hadn't found the courage to dial it. Once she made that call, there would be no going back. Emma mumbled something in her sleep, and Sarah smoothed her daughter's damp hair. The fever had scared her more than the threats, more than the men who were clearly hunting them. For a terrifying few hours, she'd imagined losing the only thing that truly mattered to her, and everything else had fallen into perspective. The money was evidence. The ledgers were evidence. The whole storage unit was a crime scene, and she was tampering with it by taking what she had. But she was also protecting Emma, and that trumped everything else. Sarah's finger hovered over the phone's keypad. Morrison had seemed honest, but cops could be bought. The heist these ATMs were connected to had to be massive, the kind of operation that corrupted everyone it touched. Could she trust that Morrison was clean? Could she trust anyone? A memory surfaced from 3 days ago, back when her biggest worry was making rent. Mrs. Chen from the apartment next door had mentioned seeing men in suits asking questions about Sarah. She'd thought it was strange at the time, assumed they were from the collection agency. Now she realized they'd been hunting her even before she'd opened the storage unit, which meant they'd known what was inside, known she'd bought it at auction. They'd been waiting to see what she'd do, watching her stumble into their trap. Sarah stood up abruptly, startling herself. If they'd been watching her from the beginning, then running was pointless. They would always be one step ahead, always know where to find her. The only way out was through. She had to turn this evidence over to someone who could use it before the real criminals silenced her permanently. She dialed Morrison's number before she could lose her nerve. It rang twice before a tired voice answered. Morrison. It's Sarah Chen. We need to meet. A pause. Sarah, where are you? We've been looking for you since... I have information about the storage unit, about what's really inside those ATMs. What are you talking about? Sarah took a deep breath, watching Emma sleep peacefully for perhaps the last time. I'm talking about evidence of a bank heist. Ledgers, cash, records going back years. And I'm talking about the people who are trying to kill me to keep it quiet. The silence stretched between them before Morrison spoke again, his voice sharp and focused. Where do you want to meet? Somewhere public, somewhere safe. Sarah glanced at the scattered money, knowing she was about to gamble everything on trusting a stranger. And detective, come alone. Sarah's hands trembled as she stared at the news report on her phone. The anchor's voice seemed to echo in the cramped motel bathroom where she'd locked herself while Emma slept. Federal investigators have confirmed that the Meridian Bank heist investigation has expanded beyond the original scope. Sources close to the FBI suggest they're following new leads that could break the case wide open. She turned off the phone and gripped the sink. 3 days had passed since Marcus Chen's visit, and the weight of her decision pressed down like a physical force. The manila envelope containing copies of the evidence sat hidden beneath the spare tire in her trunk, while the originals remained locked in the storage unit she hadn't dared revisit. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. "Mom? Are you okay?" Sarah quickly splashed water on her face and opened the door. Emma stood there in her pajamas, hair tousled from sleep, clutching the stuffed elephant that had seen better days. "I'm fine, sweetheart. Just washing up." But Emma's perceptive eyes, so much like her father's, studied Sarah's face with concern that no 8-year-old should carry. "You look scared." Before Sarah could respond, her phone buzzed with an unknown number. Her blood chilled as she recognized the pattern, the same blocked call she'd been receiving since yesterday. Always one ring, then silence. "We should get some breakfast," Sarah said, forcing brightness into her voice. "How about pancakes?" As they prepared to leave the motel, Sarah noticed the black sedan parked across the street. Different from yesterday's grey one, but the tinted windows and strategic positioning sent the same message. They were watching. She took Emma's hand and walked to their car with deliberate casualness, fighting every instinct that screamed at her to run. The sedan's engine started as they pulled out of the parking lot. "Mom, that car is following us," Emma said matter-of-factly, looking back through the rear window. Sarah's heart lurched. She'd tried so hard to shield Emma from her fear, but children noticed everything. Sometimes cars just go the same direction we do. For 3 days? The question hit Sarah like a slap. Emma had been keeping track, watching, worrying in silence, while Sarah thought she was protecting her. The realization that she'd dragged her daughter into this nightmare made her stomach clench with guilt and rage. She pulled into a busy diner's parking lot, and the sedan continued past, but she caught a glimpse of the driver in her peripheral vision. Square-jawed, dark glasses, the kind of professional anonymity that meant serious trouble. Inside the diner, Sarah chose a booth with clear sightlines to all exits, while Emma colored on the paper placemat. The normalcy of syrup and chatter and clinking dishes felt surreal against the backdrop of surveillance and threats. Her phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "Have you decided? Time is running short." Before she could respond, another message appeared from an unknown number. "Your daughter is beautiful. Red backpack, elephant toy, would hate for anything to happen to her." The phone slipped from Sarah's suddenly nerveless fingers, clattering on the table. Emma looked up from her coloring, and Sarah forced herself to breathe, to smile, to act like her world hadn't just tilted off its axis. "I need to make a phone call," she managed. "Stay right here, okay? Don't move from this booth." In the diner's small vestibule, Sarah dialed Marcus with shaking fingers. "They threatened Emma," she whispered when he answered. "They know about her backpack, her toy. They've been watching us." Marcus's voice sharpened. "Where are you?" "Mel's Diner on Harrison Street. I'll be there in 10 minutes. Stay in public. Stay calm. I can't do this anymore. She's just a little girl. Sarah, listen to me. The only way this stops is if we finish it. These people don't just disappear because you ignore them." She hung up and returned to the booth where Emma was methodically coloring a butterfly purple and green. Such focus, such innocence. How had Sarah's desperation for a better life led to this moment of pure terror? "Emma," she said softly, sliding into the booth. "We might need to take a little trip." "Where?" "Somewhere safe." Emma set down her crayon and looked directly at her mother. "Are we in trouble because of what you found in the storage place?" The question shattered Sarah's last pretense. Emma knew, had probably known from the beginning that something was wrong, had been carrying that knowledge with the same quiet strength she'd shown when her father left, when they'd lost the house, when everything fell apart. "Yes," Sarah said simply. "But I'm going to fix it." Through the window, she saw Marcus's car pull into the parking lot. Soon, she'd have to choose between running forever and fighting back. Either way, the life she'd been trying to build was over, but maybe, just maybe, they could survive what came next. Sarah's hands trembled as she stared at the news report on her phone. The FBI had announced a major breakthrough in the Meridian Bank case. They'd arrested 3 suspects in Phoenix based on credible intelligence. The reporter mentioned a reward for information leading to additional arrests, and Sarah's stomach lurched when she heard the amount. $500,000. $500,000. Enough to change everything for her and Emma. Enough to move somewhere safe, pay for college, start over completely. But Marcus Chen's warning echoed in her mind. The people behind this weren't the type to forgive and forget. They'd already demonstrated their reach by knowing about her storage unit purchase before she'd even told anyone. How long before they connected the dots between the arrests and her discovery? Emma tugged at her sleeve. "Mommy, you're doing the worried face again." Sarah forced a smile and pocketed the phone. "Just thinking, sweetheart. Want to help me make lunch?" As Emma nodded enthusiastically, Sarah's phone buzzed with an unknown number. Her blood ran cold. "Hello? Sarah Martinez?" The voice was crisp, professional. "Who's asking?" "Agent Jennifer Walsh, FBI. I'd like to speak with you about a matter of national security. Would you prefer to meet at your home, or would you be more comfortable coming to our field office?" Sarah's mouth went dry. They knew. Somehow they'd traced the tip back to her. "I'm sorry, but I think you have the wrong person." "Ma'am, I have a recording of your voice from the tip line. We take these matters very seriously, and your cooperation would be greatly appreciated. We can also discuss the reward money you're entitled to." The reward. Sarah closed her eyes, thinking of Emma's future, of the constant fear that had become her daily companion. But Chen's face flashed in her mind, his genuine concern, his warning about people who made problems disappear. "I need some time to think about this. Miss Martinez, I understand this is overwhelming, but time isn't a luxury we have. The people you've helped us identify are extremely dangerous. We need to debrief you immediately for your own safety." "My own safety?" "These individuals have resources and connections we're still uncovering. The longer you remain exposed, the greater the risk to you and your daughter." Sarah felt the walls closing in. The FBI wanted her to come forward, but doing so would paint a target on her back that might never disappear. Yet staying silent meant living in constant fear, always looking over her shoulder. "Can I call you back in an hour?" "Ma'am, 1 hour." Sarah hung up before Agent Walsh could protest. She needed advice, but who could she trust? Chen had made it clear he couldn't help beyond his initial warning. Her sister lived 3 states away and had her own problems. Her few friends from work wouldn't understand the magnitude of this situation. Then she remembered Detective Morrison, the officer who'd helped her when Emma's father had violated the restraining order last year. Morrison had been kind, patient, and most importantly, had kept her word about confidentiality. Sarah found Morrison's card in her kitchen drawer and dialed. "Detective Morrison speaking." "Detective, this is Sarah Martinez. You helped me last year with a domestic situation?" "Of course, Sarah. Is everything all right? Has Derek been bothering you again?" "No, this is something else entirely. I need advice about dealing with federal agents." Hypothetically, there was a pause. "Sarah, what kind of trouble are you in?" "I can't say much over the phone, but I've stumbled into something big. The FBI wants to meet with me, and I'm scared of the consequences either way." "Are you in immediate danger?" "I don't think so, but maybe. I'm not sure." "Listen carefully. If the FBI is involved, this is serious. My advice is to get a lawyer before you talk to anyone. Don't meet with them alone, don't sign anything, and don't let them pressure you into immediate action." "I can't afford a lawyer." "There are legal aid services, and if this is as big as you're suggesting, you might find attorneys willing to work pro bono for a piece of any reward money." "Where are you right now?" "At home with my daughter." "Stay there. Don't go anywhere until you have legal representation. And Sarah, if you're really scared, pack a bag and be ready to leave quickly. Sometimes the safest place is anywhere but where people expect you to be." After hanging up, Sarah looked at Emma coloring at the kitchen table, oblivious to the storm brewing around them. Her daughter deserved stability, safety, a normal childhood. but normal had disappeared the moment Sarah bought that storage unit. Her phone buzzed again. Agent Walsh. Sarah let it go to voicemail, then listened to the message. Ms. Martinez, we really need to speak today. Please call me back within the next 2 hours, or we'll need to send agents to your location. 2 hours. She had 2 hours to figure out how to navigate between the FBI's demands and the dangerous people who'd committed the original crime. 2 hours to decide whether to run, hide, or stand and fight. Emma looked up from her coloring. Mommy, why do you look scared? Sarah's phone buzzed against the kitchen counter at 2:47 a.m. The unknown number made her stomach clench as she answered with shaking fingers. You have something that belongs to us. The voice was calm, almost conversational, which somehow made it more terrifying than any shouted threat. I don't know what you're talking about. She gripped the phone tighter, moving away from Emma's bedroom door. Storage unit 247. Ring any bells? A soft chuckle. We know you found our little retirement fund. The question is, what are you planning to do about it? Sarah's blood turned to ice. How did you get my number? Sarah Chen, 1247 Maple Street, apartment 2B. Emma's in 3rd grade at Lincoln Elementary. Mrs. Patterson's class, right? The casual tone never wavered. We know lots of things. The phone slipped from her suddenly numb fingers, clattering against the linoleum. She scrambled to pick it up, her heart hammering so hard she could barely hear over the rushing in her ears. Don't hurt my daughter. The words came out as a whisper. Please. That's entirely up to you. We want our property back, all of it. The drives, the files, any copies you might have made. You have 48 hours. Wait, I can't just... The line went dead. Sarah stood frozen in her darkened kitchen, every shadow suddenly menacing. Through the thin walls she could hear Mrs. Rodriguez's television next door, the familiar sound of late-night infomercials that usually comforted her. Now it felt like the last normal thing in a world that had just tilted completely off its axis. She crept to Emma's room and peered through the crack in the door. Her daughter slept peacefully, clutching the stuffed rabbit she'd had since she was 2. Sarah's throat tightened. How had she been so stupid? Of course they would find her. Of course they would threaten Emma. Back in the living room, she pulled out the burner phone Detective Morrison had given her. Her finger hovered over his number for a long moment before she set it down. What could he do? Put them in protective custody? For how long? And what happened when it was over and these people were still out there? The laptop sat open on her coffee table, the copied files still displayed on the screen. Millions of dollars, maybe enough to disappear entirely, to take Emma somewhere safe and start over, but using that money would make her just as guilty as the people who stole it. A soft knock at the door made her jump. At 3 in the morning, it could only be trouble. Sarah grabbed a kitchen knife and approached slowly. Sarah? It's Marcus. She opened the door to find her upstairs neighbor looking unusually alert for the middle of the night. Marcus worked security downtown and kept odd hours, but something in his expression made her hesitate. Everything okay? I heard voices. Just the TV. She kept the chain lock engaged. Couldn't sleep. Mind if I come in? I wanted to talk to you about something. It's really late, Marcus. Maybe tomorrow? He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. I think you'll want to hear this. It's about your storage unit. Sarah's grip tightened on the knife behind the door. Marcus had been her neighbor for 6 months. Always friendly, always helpful when her car wouldn't start, or when she needed someone to watch Emma for an hour. The realization hit her like a physical blow. They'd been watching her long before she bought that unit. I'm fine, thanks. Good night, Marcus. She started to close the door, but his foot wedged into the gap. When he looked up, the friendly mask was gone entirely. Don't make this harder than it has to be, Sarah. We just want to talk. She slammed her shoulder against the door, but Marcus was stronger. The chain lock groaned under the pressure. Sarah turned and ran toward Emma's room, her daughter's safety the only thought in her mind. Mommy? Emma sat up in bed, rubbing her eyes. What's wrong? We're playing a game, baby. We need to hide, okay? Emma nodded sleepily as Sarah gathered her into her arms. The apartment's fire escape was just outside Emma's window, a route Sarah had mentally mapped months ago out of general paranoia that now seemed prophetic. Behind them, the chain locks snapped. Sarah fumbled with the window latch as footsteps moved through her apartment. Emma whimpered against her shoulder, finally sensing the real danger. The window stuck, warped by years of humidity and neglect. "Come on," Sarah whispered desperately. The footsteps were getting closer. Sarah could hear Marcus talking to someone. He wasn't alone. The window finally gave way with a screech of protest. Cold night air rushed in as Sarah climbed onto the fire escape, Emma clinging to her neck. Looking back at the apartment she'd worked so hard to afford, Sarah made her choice. Some fights couldn't be won by running, but first she had to make sure Emma was safe. The fire escape creaked under their combined weight as they descended into the darkness below. Sarah's hands trembled as she dialed Detective Morrison's number for the third time in 20 minutes. Each call went straight to voicemail, and each unanswered ring felt like another nail in her coffin. The burner phone Marcus had given her sat heavy in her palm, its alien weight a constant reminder of how far she'd fallen from the life she once knew. "Mom?" Emma's voice drifted from the bedroom, small and uncertain. "Are you okay? You keep walking around?" Sarah forced her voice to sound normal. "I'm fine, sweetheart. Just restless. Go back to sleep." But sleep was impossible. Through the thin walls of their apartment, every creak and settling sound made her freeze. The fire escape outside Emma's window had become a pathway for nightmares in Sarah's mind. She'd already checked the locks 4 times in the past hour. The clock on the microwave blinked 2:47 a.m. when she finally heard footsteps in the hallway outside their door. Sarah's blood turned to ice. The steps were measured, deliberate, nothing like the shuffle of their elderly neighbor Mr. Peterson or the quick clip of the night shift nurse from 3 Billions. She grabbed the baseball bat she'd positioned by the couch and crept toward the peephole. The hallway was empty, but a white envelope had been slipped under her door. Sarah stared at it for a full minute before gathering the courage to pick it up. Inside was a photograph that made her knees buckle. Emma walking out of school, her purple backpack bright against the afternoon sun. The photo was taken from across the street, close enough to show the gap-toothed smile on her daughter's face, close enough to prove how easy it would be to get closer. On the back, someone had written, "Tomorrow, midnight, storage unit. Come alone or she disappears." Sarah's vision blurred as panic crashed over her in waves. They knew where Emma went to school. They'd been watching, planning, while Sarah had foolishly thought she could outmaneuver people who'd already stolen millions and killed to protect their secret. She called Marcus immediately, not caring about the hour. "They threatened Emma," she whispered into the phone, her voice barely audible even to herself. "They want me to meet them at the storage unit tomorrow night." "Sarah, listen to me very carefully." Marcus's voice was sharp, alert despite the late hour. "You cannot go to that meeting. It's a trap. They're not planning to negotiate with you. They're planning to eliminate the problem permanently. But if I don't show up, if you do show up, you're both dead anyway. Think about it. They can't let you live with what you know, and they can't risk Emma talking about what happened to her mother." The brutal logic of his words hit her like a physical blow. Sarah sank onto her couch, the photograph still clutched in her trembling fingers. "Then what do I do? How do I protect her?" "We accelerate the timeline. I'm calling in favors tonight. Federal agents I trust, people who owe me. We get Emma somewhere safe, and we end this before tomorrow's meeting. And if your federal friends are compromised too? If someone tips off Vincent's people?" Marcus was quiet for a moment. "Then we run. I have contacts who can get you new identities, relocate you somewhere these people will never find you." Run? Sarah thought about Emma's school, her friends, the small life they'd built together. It wasn't much, but it was theirs. Leave everything behind? It's better than dying for it. Through the phone, Sarah could hear Marcus moving around, the sounds of him getting dressed, preparing for action. His urgency was infectious, but it also terrified her. If Marcus, who'd seemed so confident, so in control, was this worried, How bad had things really gotten? "There's something else," Sarah said, remembering the conversation she'd overheard at the police station. "I think Detective Morrison might be involved. When I went to the station yesterday, I heard him talking to someone about containing a situation, and he hasn't returned any of my calls since then." Marcus cursed softly. "That complicates things. Morrison was going to be our way into official protection. So we're completely on our own?" "Not completely. But Sarah, you need to understand what we're up against. These people have been planning this for years. They have resources, connections, and they've already proven they'll kill to protect their secret. The evidence in those ATMs could bring down more than just Vincent Romano. It could expose corruption that goes right up through law enforcement and city government." Sarah closed her eyes, feeling the weight of forces far beyond her comprehension pressing down on her. 6 months ago, her biggest worry had been making rent. Now she was caught in a web of corruption and violence that could destroy not just her life, but her daughter's future. "How long do we have?" she asked. "I'm mobilizing everything now. By dawn, we'll know who we can trust and who we can't. Until then, stay awake, stay alert, and don't let Emma out of your sight." The warehouse felt like a tomb when Sarah arrived at dawn, the metal building casting long shadows in the pale morning light. She'd barely slept, Marcus's words echoing in her mind. "They know where you live. They know about Emma." Her daughter was safe with her sister 3 states away, but the distance felt both like salvation and abandonment. Detective Rodriguez was already waiting, leaning against her unmarked sedan, with 2 cups of coffee steaming in the cold air. "You look like hell," she said, offering Sarah one of the cups. "Thanks for the pep talk." Sarah's hands shook as she accepted the coffee, the warmth doing nothing to calm her nerves. "Are you sure about this plan?" "Sure? No. But it's better than letting you disappear into witness protection while these bastards walk free." Rodriguez pulled out her phone, checking the time. "Marcus should be here soon with the FBI tech team. We get one shot at this." Sarah stared at the warehouse entrance, remembering the first time she'd opened Unit 247. If she could go back, would she have walked away, left the ATMs untouched, and kept her simple, struggling life intact? The thought felt like betrayal now, betrayal of the victims whose money had been stolen, of the investigation that could bring justice. A black SUV pulled into the lot, followed by an unmarked van. Marcus emerged from the SUV with 2 agents Sarah didn't recognize, while the van disgorged a team of technicians carrying equipment cases. "Sarah." Marcus approached with careful steps, as if she might bolt. "How are you holding up?" "I've been better." She watched the FBI team prepare their gear with military precision. "What exactly is the plan here?" Agent Chen, one of the new faces, answered. "We're going to wire the storage unit with surveillance equipment, audio, video, motion sensors. When Vincent or his people show up, and they will, we'll have them on multiple felonies." "And me?" Sarah asked. "What's my part in this trap?" Rodriguez stepped closer. "You disappear. We've got a safe house lined up. You stay there until this is over." "No." The word came out harder than Sarah intended. "I started this. I'm finishing it." Marcus frowned. "Sarah, these people have already killed multiple witnesses. Your value to this case doesn't outweigh your life." "My value?" Sarah felt anger flare in her chest. "This isn't about my value to your case. It's about Emma's future. About making sure she doesn't grow up running from shadows because her mother was too scared to see this through." The technicians were already heading toward the warehouse entrance, their equipment making soft electronic chirping sounds as they tested connections. Sarah watched them work, these federal agents treating her discovery like a crime scene, which she supposed it was. "There's something else," Rodriguez said quietly. "We found connections between the bank robbery and 2 other cases. This isn't just about $20 million. Vincent's organization has been laundering money through cryptocurrency exchanges, using the stolen cash as seed money. We're looking at a network worth over $100 million. Sarah's coffee suddenly tasted bitter. "So I really stepped in it, didn't I? You exposed something that needed exposing." Marcus said. But yes, the stakes are higher than we initially thought. Agent Chen returned from the warehouse, nodding to Marcus. We're set. Full surveillance package installed. If anyone so much as breathes in that storage unit, we'll know about it. How long do we wait? Sarah asked. Vincent's been monitoring police communications, Rodriguez explained. We're going to let slip that you've hidden something else in the unit, something that could identify his inside man at the bank. He'll have to move. Sarah felt the ground shifting beneath her feet again, the same sensation she'd had when opening those ATMs. You're using me as bait. We're using the situation, Marcus corrected. You'll be safely out of range when it goes down. But Sarah was already shaking her head. He'll know it's a setup if I'm not around. Vincent's not stupid. He'll expect me to be protecting whatever I supposedly hid. The FBI agents exchanged glances. Rodriguez stepped forward. Sarah, no. We can't guarantee your safety if you're here when this goes down. You can't guarantee my safety either way, Sarah replied. At least this way, we catch them. Marcus pulled out his phone as it buzzed with an incoming call. His expression darkened as he listened. We've got movement. Vincent's people are asking questions about the storage facility. It's happening sooner than we thought. Sarah looked toward the warehouse, where her storage unit sat wired and waiting. In a few hours, maybe less, this would all be over. Emma would be safe, or Sarah would be dead, or something in between that she couldn't quite imagine. Then we better get ready, she said, surprising herself with how steady her voice sounded. The scared single mother who'd bought a storage unit for $200 was still there, but she was no longer in control. The warehouse smelled of rust and broken dreams. Sarah pressed herself against the cold metal wall, listening to the footsteps echo through the cavernous space. Detective Martinez had insisted on meeting here, away from prying eyes and electronic surveillance, but now every shadow seemed to harbor danger. You're late. Martinez's voice cut through the darkness as he emerged from behind a stack of shipping containers. I had to make sure I wasn't followed. Sarah's grip tightened on the manila envelope containing the final piece of evidence, bank routing codes she'd extracted from the ATM memory cards. The FBI agent, Chen, I think she suspects something. Martinez nodded grimly. Chen's been asking questions about my whereabouts during the investigation. Time's running out faster than we thought. He gestured toward a makeshift table constructed from wooden crates. Show me what you found. Sarah spread the documents across the improvised surface, her hands trembling slightly. These routing numbers don't match the banks that were supposedly hit. The money was being funneled through offshore accounts, then redirected to domestic accounts in names I've never heard of. Phantom accounts, Martinez muttered, studying the papers with a penlight. Classic money laundering setup. But look at these dates. The transfers started 3 months before the heist was even reported. The implications hit Sarah like a physical blow. Someone inside the banks was setting this up long before the robbery. This wasn't a crime of opportunity. It was orchestrated by someone with access to internal banking systems and law enforcement resources. Martinez's voice carried the weight of betrayal. Sarah, what I'm about to tell you could get us both killed. The lead FBI investigator on the original case, Agent Robert Hastings, he disappeared 2 weeks after the investigation went cold. Disappeared how? Officially, took early retirement and moved to Costa Rica. Unofficially, no one's heard from him since. And guess whose signature appears on the evidence transfer orders that made 3 crucial pieces of evidence disappear from the federal lockup? Sarah's blood ran cold. Hastings was involved. Hastings was the architect. The robbery was cover for the real crime, systematic embezzlement from the bank's Federal Reserve accounts, millions of dollars drained slowly over months, hidden by the chaos of investigating a sensational heist that netted maybe $50,000 in cash. A sound echoed from the far end of the warehouse, the screech of a metal door opening. Both Sarah and Martinez froze, instinctively killing the penlight and gathering the documents. Did you tell anyone about this meeting? Martinez whispered. No one. But even as she said it, Sarah remembered Emma asking about her late nights, her nervous glances at her phone. Had her daughter mentioned something to someone, to Marcus? Footsteps approached, measured and deliberate. Multiple sets, moving in formation, professional. Detective Martinez? Sarah Chen? The voice was crisp, authoritative. This is Agent Chen, FBI. We need to talk. Martinez cursed under his breath. How did she find us? Sarah's mind raced. Chen had been watching her, following her movements, probably tracking her phone. The realization that she'd led federal agents directly to their clandestine meeting made her stomach clench with fear. We know you're here, Chen continued, her voice echoing off the warehouse walls. And we know what you've discovered. Come out, and we can discuss this rationally. She's not alone, Martinez whispered, pointing toward shadows moving near the loading docks. At least 4 agents, maybe more. Sarah clutched the envelope to her chest. Everything, Emma's future, her own safety, the truth about the conspiracy, it all hinged on what happened in the next few minutes. What do we do? Martinez was already moving, leading her deeper into the maze of stored equipment and abandoned machinery. There's a service exit near the back. If we can reach it. The sharp crack of a gunshot split the air, followed immediately by the ping of a bullet striking metal inches from Sarah's head. She dove behind a rusted conveyor belt, her heart hammering against her ribs. Warning shot, Chen's voice called out, but there was steel in it now. The next ones won't miss. You're interfering with an ongoing federal investigation. Ongoing investigation into what? Martinez shouted back, positioning himself to cover Sarah's movement toward the rear exit. Into how your own people orchestrated the biggest financial fraud in history. Silence stretched for several seconds. When Chen spoke again, her tone had shifted subtly. You don't understand the complexity of what you've stumbled into. There are national security implications. National security? Sarah found her voice, anger overriding fear. People lost their life savings because of this conspiracy. Families were destroyed. Another gunshot, closer this time. Whatever game Chen was playing, patience wasn't part of it. Martinez grabbed Sarah's hand. Run. They sprinted through the darkness, documents scattered and forgotten, their footsteps thundering against concrete as shouts erupted behind them. The service exit loomed ahead, but Sarah could hear their pursuers closing the distance. Everything was unraveling, and she still didn't know who she could trust. The abandoned warehouse stretched into shadows, its broken windows filtering pale moonlight across oil-stained concrete. Sarah pressed her back against the rusted doorframe, clutching Emma's hand as they peered into the cavernous space. 20 yards ahead, Marcus crouched behind a stack of wooden crates, his silhouette barely visible. Stay here, Sarah whispered, but Emma's grip tightened. I'm not leaving you. The sound of approaching vehicles echoed from multiple directions, engines cutting through the night air like mechanical predators closing in. Sarah's stomach lurched as she counted at least 3 different sources of noise. Too many for just Detective Reeves and his backup. Marcus's phone buzzed with an incoming text. He held up his hand, signaling them to wait, then crept toward their position. Kozlov's people are here, he breathed. Black SUVs coming from the north entrance. But there's another group approaching from the east, unmarked sedans. Police? Sarah asked. Maybe. Or Castellanos sent his own cleanup crew. Marcus checked his weapon. Either way, we're boxed in. The warehouse suddenly flooded with light as powerful beams swept through the broken windows. Voices shouted commands in accented English, followed by the slam of car doors and heavy footsteps on gravel. There. Emma pointed toward a maintenance ladder bolted to the far wall, leading up to a catwalk system that disappeared into the warehouse's upper reaches. We can get above them. Sarah studied the route, 50 yards of open ground to reach the ladder with minimal cover, but the alternative was waiting here like trapped rats while armed killers surrounded the building. Move, Marcus whispered. They sprinted across the concrete floor, their footsteps echoing despite their attempts at stealth. Sarah's lungs burned as they reached the ladder, Emma scrambling up first with surprising agility. The metal rungs felt cold and slick under Sarah's palms as she climbed, Marcus following close behind. The warehouse doors exploded inward just as they reached the catwalk. Armed figures in tactical gear poured through multiple entrances, their flashlight beams cutting through the darkness like searchlights. Sarah counted at least 8 men, moving with military precision. "Spread out," a voice commanded with a thick Russian accent. "They're here somewhere. Kozlov wants them alive, but only the woman and child. The federal agent is expendable." From their perch 20 feet above the warehouse floor, Sarah watched the search team methodically clear the ground level. These weren't street thugs or desperate criminals. They moved like professional soldiers, checking corners and communicating through hand signals. Marcus pulled out his phone and typed a message, showing it to Sarah. "Backup coming, but need 15 minutes. 15 minutes might as well be 15 hours. The searchers were already expanding their sweep pattern, and it wouldn't be long before someone thought to check the catwalk system. A new sound emerged from outside, the distinctive whine of police sirens approaching fast. The tactical team froze, their leader speaking rapidly into a radio headset. Sarah caught fragments: police response, extract now, orders changed. "This is Detective Reeves, LAPD, a voice boomed through a megaphone. "The building is surrounded. Exit with your hands visible." The response was immediate and violent. Gunfire erupted from multiple positions as the tactical team engaged the police units outside. Muzzle flashes strobed through the warehouse windows, and the air filled with the sharp crack of rifle shots and the deeper boom of police shotguns. "We need to move," Marcus whispered urgently. "This is about to become a war zone." The catwalk extended toward the rear of the warehouse, where a service door led to the loading dock area. If they could reach it during the firefight, they might slip out while both sides were focused on each other. They crawled along the metal walkway, staying low as bullets shattered windows and sparked off steel beams. Emma moved ahead with determination that both impressed and terrified Sarah. No 12-year-old should have to navigate through gunfire to survive. Halfway across the catwalk, disaster struck. A stray bullet severed one of the support cables, and the walkway lurched sickeningly to one side. Emma grabbed the railing as her feet slipped, her body swinging out over the 20-foot drop. "Mom!" Sarah lunged forward, catching Emma's wrist just as her daughter's grip on the railing failed. The walkway groaned under the shifting weight, tilting at an increasingly dangerous angle. Below them, the gunfight continued to rage, but Sarah could see one of the tactical team members looking up, drawn by Emma's cry. His eyes met hers across the smoke-filled warehouse, and his rifle began to swing upward. Marcus's service weapon barked twice, and the gunman dropped behind cover, but the damage was done. Their position was compromised. "The door!" Marcus shouted, pointing toward the service exit. "Move now!" The catwalk shuddered as more support cables snapped under the stress. They had seconds before the entire structure collapsed, sending them crashing down into the kill zone below. The warehouse felt like a tomb in the pre-dawn darkness. Sarah pressed herself against the cold metal siding, listening to Marcus's ragged breathing beside her. Through a gap in the corrugated walls, she could see Detective Chen's team positioning themselves around the perimeter, their movements careful and deliberate. "This is insane," Marcus whispered. "We should be running, not walking into their trap." Sarah's grip tightened on the flash drive in her pocket, the evidence that could either save them or get them killed. "Running just makes us look guilty. This ends tonight." Inside the warehouse, Vincent Carmichael's voice echoed off the concrete floors. He was giving orders to someone, his tone sharp with authority. Sarah had never heard him sound like this, the polite bank executive facade completely stripped away. "The truck arrives in 20 minutes, Carmichael said. "Once we transfer the remaining cash, we torch this place and disappear. Any sign of the woman or Burke?" "Nothing yet," another voice replied. Sarah recognized it as Detective Morrison, Chen's partner who'd been working with Carmichael all along. "But they'll show. They're desperate." Sarah felt Marcus tense beside her. The betrayal cut deep, Morrison had been the one feeding information to Carmichael, keeping him one step ahead of the investigation. Chen's careful planning suddenly made sense. She'd suspected her own partner. A hand touched Sarah's shoulder, making her jump. Detective Chen materialized from the shadows, her weapon drawn but lowered. "They're expecting you," Chen whispered. "But not us. You still willing to do this?" Sarah nodded, though her heart hammered against her ribs. The plan was simple in theory. She and Marcus would walk in as expected, giving Chen's team the distraction needed to move into position. But plans had a way of falling apart when bullets started flying. "Remember," Chen continued, "keep them talking as long as possible. Once you're inside, we'll have clear shots through the skylights." Marcus grabbed Sarah's arm. "What about Emma? If this goes wrong—" "Emma's safe," Sarah said firmly. "She's with my neighbor, and Chen has protection on them. This is our only chance to end this without spending our lives looking over our shoulders." They moved toward the main entrance, leaving the safety of the shadows. Sarah's legs felt unsteady, but she forced herself to walk normally. The warehouse door stood partially open, spilling yellow light onto the cracked asphalt. "Sarah Chen, come on in," Carmichael's voice called out before they even reached the threshold. "And bring your friend. We have so much to discuss." The interior was mostly empty except for several wooden crates stacked near the far wall and two black SUVs parked side by side. Carmichael stood between the vehicles, immaculate in his suit despite the circumstances. Detective Morrison flanked him, gun drawn but not aimed. Two other men Sarah didn't recognize completed their small army. "I have to admit, I'm impressed," Carmichael said as they approached. "Most people would have taken the money and run. Instead, you've caused me considerable inconvenience." "Sorry to ruin your retirement plans," Sarah replied, surprised by the steadiness in her own voice. Carmichael laughed. "Retirement? My dear, this was never about retirement. This was about justice. Do you have any idea how much money that bank has stolen from ordinary people through fees, foreclosures, predatory loans? I simply redistributed their wealth." "To yourself," Marcus said. "To worthy causes. Charities, community organizations, families facing foreclosure. I've done more good with that money than Meridian Bank ever would have." Morrison checked his watch nervously. "Vincent, we need to move. The truck—" "We'll wait," Carmichael snapped. "First, I need what they've stolen from me." His eyes fixed on Sarah. "The flash drive, the one you took from the ATM's internal memory." Sarah's hand instinctively moved toward her pocket, then stopped. "What makes you think I have it?" "Because you're not stupid. You knew that storage unit was too convenient, too clean. You suspected it was bait, but you went anyway, which means you already had evidence and were trying to verify it." Above them, Sarah caught the faintest movement across one of the skylights. Chen's team was in position. "You're right," Sarah said, pulling out the flash drive. "I do have it. But destroying this won't help you. I've already given copies to the FBI." Carmichael's composure cracked slightly. "Impossible. The FBI would have—" "Would have what? Arrested you already?" Sarah smiled grimly. "They're building a case, making sure it's airtight. You think Morrison was your only inside source?" Morrison raised his weapon, pointing it directly at Sarah's chest. "She's lying, Vincent. Let's finish this and go." But Carmichael held up a hand, his mind working. Sarah could see the doubt creeping in, the careful calculation of a man who'd stayed ahead for so long by thinking 3 moves ahead. That moment of hesitation was all Chen needed. The first shot shattered the skylight above them, sending glass cascading down like deadly rain. The warehouse felt like a tomb in the pre-dawn darkness. Sarah crouched behind a stack of pallets, her heart hammering against her ribs as she watched Marcus pace near the entrance. Detective Rivera and her team had positioned themselves throughout the building, but Sarah couldn't see them from her hiding spot. The weight of the wire taped to her chest felt enormous, every breath threatening to give her away. "You're late," Marcus called out, as headlights swept across the loading dock. Sarah's mouth went dry as she recognized the voice that answered. "Traffic." Detective Morrison stepped into the light, and Sarah had to bite back a gasp. The man she'd trusted, who'd promised to protect her and Emma, moved with the casual confidence of someone who owned the night. "Did you handle the Rivera problem?" Marcus asked, checking his watch. Morrison nodded. "She's tied up with a false lead across town. Won't be an issue for hours." He pulled out his phone, scrolling through messages. "The crew's getting antsy. They want their cut. They'll get it when I say they get it." Marcus's voice carried an edge that made Sarah shiver. "First, we need to clean up the loose ends, starting with our little storage unit discoverer." Sarah's blood turned to ice. She pressed herself deeper into the shadows, praying the wire was picking up every word. "About that," Morrison said, his tone careful. "Maybe we're moving too fast. She's just a desperate mom who stumbled into something. We could buy her off, relocate her and the kid." Marcus laughed, the sound echoing off the concrete walls. "You're getting soft, Danny. That's not how this works." He gestured to the far end of the warehouse, where Sarah could now make out several figures moving in the darkness. $23 million doesn't stay hidden by leaving witnesses alive. "The money's already cleaned," Morrison protested, "funneled through enough shell companies that even if she talked—" "If—" Marcus stepped closer to Morrison, his voice dropping to a whisper that the wire barely caught. "There is no if in $23 million. There's only certainty." Sarah's hands shook as she adjusted her position, trying to get a better view. Through the gaps in the pallets, she could see Morrison's face clearly now. The man who'd sat in her living room, who'd assured her that Emma would be safe, looked pale and uncertain. "The storage unit was supposed to be cleaned out months ago," Morrison said. "If Torres hadn't gotten greedy, kept those ATMs as trophies." "Torres got what Torres deserved," Marcus cut him off. "And now we finish what we started. No loose ends, no witnesses, no problems." A new voice joined the conversation, and Sarah's blood chilled as she recognized Detective Williams from the police station. "Disposal teams in position. We can make it look like a car accident. Mother and daughter, tragic loss. Emma." Sarah bit down on her knuckle to keep from crying out. "They were talking about killing Emma." "The kid's at the safe house," Morrison said quickly. "She doesn't know anything." "She's a liability," Williams replied matter-of-factly. "Clean slate means clean slate." Sarah closed her eyes, fighting waves of nausea. The wire felt like it was burning against her skin. Where was Rivera? The plan had been for the detective and her team to move in once they had enough evidence, but how much more did they need? "Sarah Chen will be here in an hour," Marcus continued, checking his phone. "Morrison, you'll make the call. Tell her we have new information about her safety. Get her to come alone." Morrison nodded reluctantly. "And then?" "Then we finish this." Marcus walked toward the shadows, where the other figures waited. 12 years of planning, 3 years of execution, and 18 months of cleanup. We're not losing it all because some single mother bought the wrong storage unit. Sarah's phone buzzed softly against her leg. A text from Morrison. "New development. Need you to come to warehouse. Address I'm sending. Come alone. Emma's safety depends on it." The irony wasn't lost on her. They expected her to walk into her own execution. Another buzz, this time from a number she didn't recognize, moved to exit door on east side. Now. Rivera. Sarah looked toward where she thought the east side might be, her heart pounding. The men were still talking near the loading dock, their voices carrying in the empty space. She had to move now while they were distracted. Taking a deep breath, Sarah began to crawl toward what she hoped was safety, the wire still recording every word as Marcus detailed exactly how they planned to eliminate the last witness to the biggest bank heist in history. Behind her, Morrison's phone rang, and she heard him answer with practiced deception. "Sarah? Thank God you picked up. We need to meet. It's about Emma." The warehouse felt like a tomb in the pre-dawn darkness. Sarah crouched behind a stack of crates, her heart hammering against her ribs as she watched Marcus pace near the storage unit. He kept checking his phone, the blue glow illuminating his face in harsh angles. Detective Chen had positioned herself on the opposite side of the building, and Sarah could barely make out her silhouette through the grimy windows. Everything hinged on the next few minutes. Marcus's phone buzzed, and Sarah strained to hear his voice carry across the concrete space. "Yeah, I'm here. Where the hell are you?" A pause. "No, nobody followed me. Just get here so we can finish this." Sarah's hands trembled as she adjusted the wire taped to her chest. The tiny microphone felt like it was burning through her shirt, a constant reminder of how precarious her situation had become. One wrong move, one suspicious glance from Marcus, and everything would fall apart. The sound of approaching vehicles broke the silence. Sarah pressed herself deeper into the shadows as headlights swept across the warehouse entrance. 2 black SUVs pulled up, and she recognized Vincent Chen stepping out of the first one, his expensive suit incongruous in the industrial setting. Behind him came 3 other men, all carrying themselves with the casual confidence of people accustomed to violence. "About time," Marcus called out, walking toward them. "I was starting to think you'd chickened out." Vincent's laugh was cold. "Chickened out? Marcus, I've been planning this cleanup for weeks, ever since your little storage unit discovery threatened to unravel 20 years of careful work." Sarah's breath caught. 20 years. This wasn't just about the bank heist she'd stumbled onto, it went much deeper. "The woman's handled?" Vincent continued, and Sarah felt ice flood her veins. Marcus nodded. "Taken care of, along with her kid. Can't have loose ends." The casual way he spoke about Emma's murder, about her murder, made Sarah's vision blur with rage. She had to bite down on her lip to keep from crying out. The metallic taste of blood grounded her, reminded her why she was here. Good. "And the ATMs? Everything's in the unit, just like you wanted. All the evidence from the Meridian job, plus the backup drives from the other operations. Once we torch this place, it'll be like none of it ever happened." Vincent walked closer to the storage unit, his footsteps echoing in the vast space. "You know, Marcus, when I recruited you 15 years ago, I never imagined we'd end up here. A corrupt cop was supposed to make things simpler, not more complicated. Hey, I've kept your secrets all this time. The Meridian heist, the money laundering through the precinct evidence room, the witness eliminations, and now you want out." Vincent's voice turned sharp. "Nobody gets out, Marcus. You know too much." Sarah saw Marcus take a step backward, his hand moving toward his weapon. But Vincent's men were faster. The sound of guns being drawn seemed impossibly loud in the enclosed space. "You didn't really think I'd let you retire to Florida, did you?" Vincent asked, almost conversationally. "Live on your beach house, paid for with blood money, while I spent every day wondering when you might decide to come forward? We had a deal." Marcus's voice cracked. "Deals change." The gunshot was deafening. Sarah watched Marcus crumple to the concrete, a dark stain spreading beneath him. She clamped both hands over her mouth to stifle a scream, her whole body shaking uncontrollably. Vincent stepped over Marcus's body without a second glance. "Clean this up, then burn everything. I want this warehouse reduced to ash by sunrise." That was Chen's cue. Sarah heard the detective's voice boom across the warehouse. "Police! Everyone on the ground now!" Chaos erupted. Vincent's men scattered, drawing weapons as emergency lights flooded the space. Sarah stayed pressed against the crates, knowing her only job now was to survive long enough for the recording to matter. Gunfire exploded around her, muzzle flashes strobing in the darkness. She heard Chen shouting coordinates into her radio, calling for backup that was already surrounding the building. Vincent was running toward a side exit, but SWAT officers emerged from every doorway, cutting off his escape routes. Within minutes, it was over. Vincent Chen knelt on the concrete in handcuffs, his expensive suit torn and dirty. His men were either down or surrendering. The warehouse filled with police officers, paramedics, federal agents, all the cavalry Chen had promised would come. Sarah finally stood on unsteady legs, her ears ringing from the gunfire. Detective Chen appeared at her side, gently removing the wire from her chest. "You did it," Chen said quietly. "We got everything. Vincent, the confession about the other operations, all of it. Sarah looked around at the controlled chaos, at Vincent being read his rights, at the storage unit that had started this whole nightmare. She thought about Emma, probably wondering where her mother was, probably scared and confused at their safe house. But for the first time in weeks, Sarah wasn't afraid anymore.